You were born in Baghdad 4 days apart from a boy whose face would one day cost you your own. You were a merchant's son. Ordinary. The kind of child a city has a million of. And by an accident of bone and blood, you grew up looking almost exactly like the most dangerous young man in the country. The president's son. In school, the others laughed about it. They lined you up beside his photograph and said you could be twins. You laughed too. You were a boy. A resemblance was a costume you could take off. You did not understand yet that a face is not always yours to keep. That somewhere, the wrong person was filing your name away for later. You thought you were lucky to look like power. You had it exactly backwards. Years later, you were a soldier at the front, mud and noise and other men's sons dying around you. And then a car came for you. A good car, in a place where good cars did not belong. The men in it did not explain. In that country, you did not ask. They drove you out of the war and into a palace, marble, gold, silence so deep it felt like a held breath. You walked through rooms built to make a man feel small, and you told yourself this was an honor. A poor boy summoned by the family that ran the world you lived in. You were 23. You still believed that being noticed by power was a kind of safety. You were about to learn that when the powerful finally see you, it is almost never good news. They told you very calmly what you were for. You were to become his fedai, his double, his shield made of meat. When there was a crowd that might hide an assassin, a road that might hide a bomb, a moment too dangerous for the president's son to risk his own skin, you would wear his face and walk into it instead. You said no. You were a person. You had a family, a future, a name. You said no, and they smiled, because they had heard no before, and they knew exactly what it was worth. They put you in a room with no light and no time. Days became the same gray hour over and over. And slowly you understood the real offer. It was not be his double or go home. It was be his double or disappear. So you said yes, not because you were a coward, because no was just a slower way to die. Then they began to erase you. For 6 months, they rebuilt you into him. You learned his walk, the lazy, kingly slouch of a man who had never once been told no. You learned his voice, his cruel little laugh, the way he signed his name. You practiced his smile until your own face forgot how it used to move. And when training was not enough, the surgeons finished the job. They changed your jaw, your teeth. They edited your face the way you would edit a sentence, until the man in the mirror was a stranger wearing your eyes. People think the cruelest thing they took from you was your freedom. It was not. It was your face, the one your mother knew, the one thing that had ever been only yours. You looked in the glass, and the monster looked back, and he was getting better at being you than you were. So you stepped into his life, and his life was a beautiful nightmare. Palaces with gold taps and marble floors, cars worth more than your father had earned in a lifetime. Anything you pointed at, someone brought you. From the outside, it looked like every poor boy's dream. But you saw the other thing too. The way the servants' eyes dropped when you entered a room, not with respect, with terror. The way a whole house could go silent the instant his name was spoken. You ate like a prince, and you slept like a prisoner, because the walls that kept the world out also kept you in. A cage does not stop being a cage just because the bars are made of gold. And every morning you put on his face and went out to be loved and feared as a man you were learning to hate. Up close, you learned what he really was. You will not get the details from this story, because the people they happen to deserve better than to be entertainment. It is enough to say that he hurt people the way other men breathe. Without thought, without cost, certain that no one would ever stop him. You stood at the edges of it. You saw the faces of the ones he ruined. And here's the part that breaks you, even now. Because you wore his face, the world began to put his sins on your skin. People flinched from you. hated you, carried the memory of what he did and stitched it onto your eyes. You were innocent, and you were walking around inside the costume of a man who never would be. Somewhere, every day, there was someone weeping for what that face had done, and you had to wear it to breakfast. He liked to remind you that you were not a person to him. You were a thing he owned. Once he raised a gun and fired at you, just to watch you flinch. The bullet grazed you. He laughed. To him it was a joke. To you it was the truth of your whole life in a single second. Your body was his to spend. And then came the day he ordered you to do a thing no person should ever do to another. A cruelty with your hands. His sin. But your fingers. And something in you, the small last thing they had not been able to operate out of you, stood up and said no. You took a blade to your own arms in front of him, in front of the man he wanted you to break. You bled rather than obey. You told him without a word, "You can have my face. You will never have my hands." It was the bravest thing a powerless man can do. You refused to become what you were wearing. After that, you knew the cage had only one exit, and it was a dangerous one. So you ran. North, into the cold, into the mountains where the regime's enemies lived. You ran with the one possession you could not leave behind and could not bear to keep. His face, stitched onto yours. And the world gave you its cruelest joke. The rebels caught you. The very people who dreamed of killing the president's son. And they looked at you, and they saw him. They put you against a wall to execute the monster at last. And you, who had spent years being forced to be him, now had to beg and weep and prove that you were no one, that you were nobody, that the most ordinary thing about you, your real and forgotten self, was the only thing that could save your life. You survived by convincing your enemies that you did not matter at all. You got out. A cold country far away gave you a door, a name, a chance to begin again. But you can never fully come home to yourself. The face in the mirror is still half his. When you smile, a piece of him smiles with you. You spend your life telling the world what was done to you. And the world, in return, argues about whether you ever existed at all. Some say your story is too strange to be true. That is its own kind of prison. To survive a nightmare and be told you dreamed it. So you hold the two truths because you have to. You survived a monster who tried to wear you like a glove, and you will never be entirely only yourself again. You were not powerful. You were not a villain. You were just a man who happened to be born with the wrong face at the wrong time. A man the storm picked up, wore like a mask, and set down when it was finished with him. And still, somehow, underneath all of it, you kept the one thing they could not cut out. You stayed you. Every week, we put you inside another impossible life. A face you never chose, a name that was never meant to be yours. You were the man who refused to become the monster he was forced to wear. Next, we step into a different kind of shadow. Not a stolen face, but a stolen childhood, behind the walls of a palace where the whole world is watching and no one is allowed in. Subscribe and find out who you wake up as next.